feedback. I'm going to call the meeting to order. And, laptops up here. Board members are accessing their laptops during the meeting. They're using laptops solely to access the board meeting materials, which are in electronic form. As you know, the board has experienced a significant number of vacancies in its membership to the point where quorum concerns have arisen. It's extremely important that members do not meet, even temporarily, during the full board meeting. As the board considers action items on its agenda and the business to be done, all members need to be present. If members need to step out, even for a moment, please request a break. Or if it's to take an emergency call, please ensure that you are the only member stepping out of the room at that time. I would truly appreciate it if all members would remain in attendance until we come to a break or the agenda is completed. The board welcomes public comment on any items not on the agenda, and its board's intent to ask for public comment prior to the board taking action on any agenda item. If for some reason I forget to ask for public comment on the agenda items and you wish to speak on that item, please raise your hand and you will be recognized. I would like to remind all speakers to complete a presenter's slip, and it looks like this. It's in the back of the room. And to hand it to Ms. Thompson. Ms. Thompson, if you would stand and identify yourself, please. That's Ms. Thompson. Make sure she has them. I'll do my best to call on everyone who wishes to speak. But you have to do your part and at least make sure I have a presenter's slip. I want to remind all speakers to please stay on topic and to keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. We plan to take a break for lunch around 11:30, although we may run a bit longer. I would like to be able to finish so we can start the strategic planning discussion as close to 1 p.m. as possible, and therefore we should be able to adjourn by 3, as we will be close to losing members who need to get to the airport. So I would like to ask Ms. Thompson, please come forward and call the roll. Good morning. Dr. Carlon.
Here.
Ms. King.
Here.
Dr. DeRusso.
Here.
Dr. Levine.
Here.
Dr. Lowe.
Here.
Dr. Moran.
Here.
Dr. Solomonson.
Here.
Ms. Shipsky.
Here.
Ms. Yaroslavsky. Present. We have a quorum. Thank you very much. I have this following speaker slip for items not on the agenda. Stan Finansky, would you come forward, please? Number 3 minutes.
I have a one-page handout that I gave to Ms. Thompson. It's a page out of your own website on expert reviewers. If you could pass it out, possibly the board members could look at it. I'm going to refer to it in my remarks. Before I start my remarks, yesterday you had a presentation about the difficulty of recruiting new people, particularly in universities, because of the travel restrictions. And I hope your travel restrictions are lifted so you can do it in a normal fashion. In the meantime, you might consider doing a video, a how-to video or an instructional video, or the 10 most asked questions. Paul Costa is here running the machines today, and I think he has the capabilities and the expertise to do it. In other words, a downloadable video to how to apply to the medical board if you're a resident, or if you haven't ever applied before, if you're a renewing license. And the doctors are smart enough now they can download it, and maybe when you get your travel privileges back, you can go back to the original method, but maybe in the meantime, Paul can put together a video or streaming video or something that's downloadable. The comments that I have today, the real comments, have to do with expert reviewer and a problem that you're having with your orders. I mentioned yesterday the problem that you're issuing orders, probably 50 or 100 orders that are bogus because you're asking for specialty or subspecialty examination in radiology or anesthesiology. You have no test. You have no way to grade the test and no standard. If you had a stack of those today, you wanted to hold an examination right now and haul the doctors in, there'd be no way to test them. You don't have a test, and you don't have a way to score, and then you don't have a way to know what the score means. That's a problem. You can't do it, police can't do it, and there are 4 or 5 other institutions that cannot do it. They're called the out-of-state programs, and that's what I'm talking about now. An out-of-state program is sort of like PACE, but it's not in California, and it's not accredited to be a training program. And there are several problems. And what I would like to do is throw a caution flag out that your staff is working on something new, which is you've never done before, which is to deal with out-of-state programs. I'm going to throw the caution flag out and say they have no track record. You've never dealt with them before. They don't have the test that we've been talking about. In other words, to go to an out-of-state agency that doesn't have the test won't help you at all, won't solve the problem. They do not have the tests in radiology, in MRI, in anesthesiology, or in oncology. They just don't have it, so it won't solve your problem. It'll just compound it. They also don't have standards. You can't rely on them to grade anything. They don't have any grading standards. They don't have faculty. There's 4 or 5 of them, so it's easy to check 4 or 5 institutions, and I've gotten a list of all their faculty and checked it against the American Board Registries and against your own master computer, and none of them have faculty that are qualified to do what you would want them to do. So the problem is faculty. The other thing is that the orders that you issue have the words clinical training program. You require, as medical board members, in your orders printed there, it has to be a clinical training program. Turns out these 4 are not. They don't qualify under the definition of clinical training program under California law. There's a California law called BNP 2228. It says a clinical training program must complete the training before it does the testing. You get the idea. First there has to be a real training program, which none of these comply with, especially in radiology and oncology and anesthesiology. Then they have to finish the work.
You need to wrap it up, please. Thank you.
I will. I'll take a minute, though. They have to finish the work before they do the testing, and none of the 4 do that. Also, they have a problem with the fact that there is no contract between those agencies in California. You already have about 500 problems with entering into transactions where you don't have contracts. This would be more. This would cause problems with the public contract code. You have no RFPs, no contracts with the out-of-state vendors, and you would be, in effect, excluding California vendors or potential bidders if you dealt exclusively with or with an out-of-state contract. They don't have, out-of-state contractor, they don't have a license. The other thing is accreditation. If you want a training program, it must be accredited. You're asking subspecialists with California licenses to be trained in a training program, but you want them to somehow deal with an unaccredited, unlicensed entity. They also don't have a business license, and they're not qualified to do business in California. So if they came here today and said, "We're here, we want to do business, give us our money," you couldn't deal with them.
Dr. you need to be finished. Thank you. Ms. Harold, the Executive Officer of the Pharmacy Board, has asked to present at this time. Ms. Harold, Ms. Smith-Crowley, and Ms. Sink, please come forward and introduce yourselves on the topic, please. We're on, pardon me? We're on agenda item number 19. My apologies.
Let me just, first of all, thank you for taking us ahead, although we were certainly interested in watching how another board does business, so thank you very much. I'm delighted. I'm not complaining. It's wonderful. I have an out-of-town guest I need to take back to the airport anyway, so this is wonderful. I'm Virginia Harold. I'm the Board of Pharmacy's Executive Officer, and I'm here today with Ms. Shannon Smith-Crowley and with Dr. Catherine Basink. Ms. Smith-Crowley is a representative of the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. Dr. Basink is with USC School of Pharmacy, and both of them are very interested in women's health, and we are before you today to update a protocol that we've had in California state law available to pharmacists so that they can provide emergency contraception to patients. And so I'm going to turn it over to the experts and allow them to provide the presentation. And we are not pre-rehearsed, so you're going to see what you see.
Thank you for the introduction again, Shannon Smith-Crowley. And
Excuse me, could you pull the mic a bit closer to you or project more, please?
Shannon Smith-Crowley, the American, is now the Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists for District 9 for California. And this actually started back years ago when, before emergency contraception was over the counter / behind the counter. And it's always been that a pharmacist and a physician can have a protocol to substitute for a prescription. So instead of doing that on a case-by-case basis, we moved to the statewide protocol because emergency contraception is so safe that it can be dispensed And we always thought it should be without a prescription. So even though now the FDA has approved most emergency contraception to be behind the counter for those that are 17 and over, we still have the statewide protocol that's valid for those that are under 17, and also there's a new drug, Ella, that does still require a prescription. So this statewide protocol is still valid. We just needed to update it to make sure it was consistent with the current science. And I appreciate very much the outreach from the Board of Pharmacy in working on this issue, and we've worked very closely. I appreciate that.
Please.
I'm Kathy Basing from USC School of Pharmacy, working with the Pharmacy Board and the American Congress of Obstetrics and Gynecology. I got to learn that one now.
That's ACOG, right?
ACOG, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, the protocol was originally worked on in 2003, and the revisions really reflect changes in emergency contraception practice in 2011. And revision of the protocol would enable women in California, particularly low-income women, to get access to emergency contraception.
Just to bring some reference to this, in 2004, this board did adopt the protocol, and all we're bringing forward to you today from the Pharmacy Board and the experts who put this together is an update on that protocol, and so we need to adopt that revised protocol.
So in light of that, do I have a motion to revise the emergency contraception protocol? To adopt. To adopt. I apologize if I didn't say that. Do I have a second? Thank you. Do I have any public comment? Do you have any questions from any of the members of the board? Dr. Salmonson?
I just wondered, and I should know if it's a doctor, Dr. Corleone would know, if somebody lies and it's been more than 5 days, it says it won't obviously work, but is there, for instance, a birth defect, should there be more education going on to, it just won't work, but it's really going to increase the chances of birth defects? I mean, do you know about that aspect?
The evidence that we have says that that is not the case. The FDA removed teratogenicity language from the language in the birth control pills in 1991, I believe.
Okay.
And also, actually, the OBGYNs encourage advance purchase so that it's in, your drawer, because it's effective. There's debate whether it's 3 days or 5 days, but the sooner that it's taken, the more effective it is.
Excuse me, Dr. Carrera. What we recommend is education and prevention, especially at the level of the family and the schools. And we found that is very, very, very effective.
Thank you. Do I have any other comments from any of the members of the board? So I'll call the question. All those in favor of this motion to adopt, please say yes. Yeah. Or aye. Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? It's done. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So we're going to move back to our agenda from yesterday and start with item number 7, the Enforcement Chief's Report. Ms. Threadgill, if you would please come forward.
Good morning. May I receive a motion for the approval of 8 orders restoring licenses to clear status following completion of probation, and 3 orders for license surrender during period of probation or administrative action.
Do you have a motion from someone on the board, please? So moved. Any public discussion? Any discussion or questions from any of the members of the board? All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? It's done. Thank you.
Moving to agenda item 7B, the expert utilization report, which can be found at page 63 in your package. reflects that we currently have 1,223 active experts on our list, and calendar year to July 1st, we have utilized 283 experts. 3 were off the list experts, and they reviewed 444 cases. Moving to agenda item C, I'd like to first introduce the investigative staff that are here today for your comfort. If I could get the investigators to stand. Thomas Campbell and Mark Loomis is a supervising investigator, and they are from Sacramento. I'd like to acknowledge that Andrew Hagline was here, and I wanted to announce that he was promoted to supervising investigator 2 recently in our Office of Standards and Training. The vacancy rate for the investigators is currently hovering around 13%. However, the vacancy rate for supervising investigators has reached a staggering 29%, bringing the investigative staff overall vacancy rate to 16%. We have received freeze exemptions for the supervising investigator positions, and we're at work and engaged in the selection process now. We've also received freeze exemptions to fill medical consultant positions throughout the state, and we are also involved in the selection process for those positions. We are anticipating the freeze exemptions, which will allow us to fill existing investigator vacancies, and Deputy Director Kimberly Kirchmeyer will provide a status report regarding those all outstanding freeze exemption requests during her report. The last board meeting, I reported that the complaint unit was being overwhelmed due to staffing shortages. Well, I have noted that the complaint unit, although they've experienced staffing challenges, we have had an increase from 6,539 complaints in fiscal year 09-10 to 7,117 in this previous fiscal year 10-11. So the complaints are going up, staffing challenges remain, and we're keeping our head above water, but I don't know how long we'll be able to tread if we don't get those positions filled. Direct your attention to agenda item 7C2 on page 68. As you may recall, at the previous board meeting, this information was provided. However, it was broken down by case type, which provided far more detail and smaller data sets, so it was difficult to draw conclusions. The chart presented on page 68 reflects the average days for each enforcement data marker for all case types, closed during the last 3 fiscal years. Also provided on pages 68.2 through 68.4 are the flow diagrams which display the entire process for each of the fiscal years. I would like to continue to provide this information to you quarterly if you feel it's useful. Do you have any questions regarding the charts? The acquisition of medical records continues to be an area where there is room for improvement. Also, there is room for improvement of the timeline in the area of completing the subject interview. We actually have a case where we are seeking the subject interview and it has been tied up in subpoena enforcement for almost 2 years in the Court of Appeals. So it's currently in the Court of Appeals. I mean, that's just some of the challenges in getting subject interviews. However, the great news is that the governor has signed into law board-sponsored bill AB 1127, which makes it unprofessional conduct if a subject repeatedly fails to attend and participate in an interview. And I'm hopeful that this will reduce the need to have to take these cases to subpoena enforcement. We will be watching this in the future and report back to you. Despite the challenges presented with staffing shortages, investigators reduced the time it takes to resolve a case by 11 days, fiscal year 10-11, in comparison to fiscal year 09-10. So there has been some improvement, and we anticipate once we get all the vacancies filled, there'll be even greater improvement in the next fiscal year. Moving to the probation program enhancements. At the May Enforcement Committee meeting, probation unit staff presented their proposal for enhancing and improving the existing practice monitoring condition. Staff presented a number of forms that had been developed to provide better direction to the practice monitors, which included medical record audit tools, an audit tool for performing an initial site visit with the probationer, a detailed monitoring plan and description of the expectations, rules, and responsibilities a physician would be assuming if approved to act as a practice monitor. The feedback received from the Enforcement Committee was very positive, and the unit has started moving forward to implement these improvements. All of the proposed forms, which were shared with the committee in May, have received final approval from legal counsel, and the probation manager is in the process of updating the procedure manual to incorporate these changes and to provide direction and training to the probation unit staff. It's anticipated that these new forms and protocols will be fully implemented within the next 3 months. All existing practice monitors will then be transitioned to the new reporting format, chart audit tool, and their existing monitoring plan will be reviewed and modified if necessary. I'd like to direct your attention to agenda item 7C on page 67. This is an additional probation enhancement that has been implemented or developed. The chart displays components that we consider when determining if other programs are equivalent to the UCSD PACE program. I want to point out that there is some flexibility in determining equivalency if a program is missing a requirement that can be satisfied in another way. For example, if you look at the middle of the page under the physical examination component, if this component is missing from other programs, we could in fact approve a physician to conduct the examination and provide a report in order to allow that program to be considered equivalent. And on a final note, I'd like to commend the outstanding effort by Deputy Chief Laura Sweet and Deputy Attorney General Thomas Lazar for their collaboration on revisions to improve the vertical enforcement manual and make it more user-friendly. We are targeting September for the statewide implementation and use of this newly revised document. That completes my report.
Thank you. Do I have any questions from any members of the board on the enforcement report? So we will have Mr. Ramirez, thank you very much for coming forward, to join Ms. Thurgill and go through the vertical enforcement program report, please.
Good morning, Ms. Carlos Ramirez, Office of the Attorney General. We have submitted a copy of HQE's roster, and you can find this at page 7.0. It gives you an idea as to the distribution of HQE staff throughout the state. In addition to that, we have also submitted a matrix of cases that are unfiled in the AG's office. This is as of 7/14/11. The figures have changed a little, going down to the number of cases that are 30 days in our office. That has changed from 3 to 2. The figure of the number of cases that remain in our office that are from 31 to 60 days have changed from 7 to 3. The number of cases that remain in our office that are within 61 and 90 days old have changed from 3 to 2, and the number of cases that are over 90 days old has changed from 4 to 2. We have recently developed a statistical report and submitted that with limited data for the approval of your executive director. That has been approved. Apparently that was something that she could work with. The only thing that remains to be done is that we have to expand the scope or to actually report data for years, going back to 2009. We're in the process of compiling that data. We expect to submit it to the executive director in the next few weeks. If there are any questions with regards to my report, I'd be glad to answer them.
Could you repeat that? I'm not clear, and can you speak closer to the mic? I'm just not hearing what you're saying clearly.
Okay, as to what aspect of it?
About the statistics that you've submitted?
Yeah, we've actually developed a report mechanism, okay, and tested it. We submitted that to you, your executive director, for approval, and apparently the factors that appear there are factors that she's looking for. What remains to be done is that we have to expand the data from the first quarter of this year to actually going back to maybe 2009. Okay? And we're in the process of doing that right now. But it's going to take a couple of weeks to basically work out everything.
So that we can expect to have by the next board meeting a more robust report on those statistics going back to 2009?
That's correct.
Very good. Thank you. Does that conclude your report?
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ramirez. Okay, before the I apologize. On item number 7, our enforcement report, I haven't heard from Mr. Formansky. I didn't call him, so I apologize. You've got to keep your remarks for 3 minutes, or I'm going to shut off the microphone. Seriously.
Emma, is this on?
Yes, it's on.
If you'll refer to page 67, that was what Ms. Threadgill was talking about under item 7C. This shows some of 4 of the outline programs that are called out-of-state programs. I have prepared a handout for you that includes most of the data from your page 67, and then it shows why these programs won't work for about 12 of the specialties. The programs don't include subspecialty tests in radiology or in anesthesiology or 12 other specialties. They don't have the objective published standards, so I have included under your chart, my chart, that shows it won't work. It won't work for about 12 of the specialties. It violates section 2228 of the state law of California. So what are you going to do? Go out of state and you, as the board, are going to allow another agency or another program in another state to violate state law? Doesn't make any sense. The reason to present this chart is you can't really substitute one bad thing with another. The underlying problem is that you have orders that are not enforceable. When the orders are issued, you don't have the tests, and neither do these out-of-state programs have the proper testing. Not in the specialties that I've talked to you about. Also, with respect to the actual qualifications of the doctors, I've checked the actual faculties of the programs, and they don't have any radiologists, and they don't have any oncologists, so they don't have any way to train, so they can't do the training, and they're not experts. I handed out your own list of qualifications for California experts. I made 10 copies, I don't know if you got that, but they have to be board certified in specialty, 3 years experience, 80 hours per week. None of these people have the qualifications, so you can't substitute one bad program for another. So why don't you read this over and see if you have any questions you can ask me. It also violates the competitive bidding requirements. You're favoring out-of-state program for an in-state program. You don't have a valid written contract with them, and it's very expensive. They're asking at least $8,000 on average to do what you're not doing right. They don't have the tests. You want the doctors of the board to pay $8,000 to give the wrong test? So that concludes my comments.
Thank you very much, sir. So before the committee reports, I'd like to move our presentation, starting with agenda item number 20. So I'd ask Dr. Catherine Nation to come forward. Dr. Catherine Nation is the Associate Vice President for Health Sciences at the University of California's Office of the President. She completed her undergraduate studies at UC Davis, right here in Sacramento. She earned her medical degree from UC San Francisco in 1989. Her current responsibilities include leadership and coordination of health science academic affairs, liaison with deans and faculty involving educational policy and program planning, monitoring of the health workforce needs, and the representation of UC health sciences programs internally and externally. She served as the lead in the study identifying the best practices in admissions, and it was published in 2004 by the National Academies in a book entitled In the Nation's Compelling Interest, Ensuring a Diversity in the Healthcare Workforce. In 2008, she was appointed as a commissioner on the California Healthcare Workforce Policy Commission, a statewide body established to support statewide primary care training and workforce diversity. Dr. Nation continues to lead efforts with UC Medical Schools involving new PR programs in medical education, such as the PRIME program, which provides specialized training to prepare future UC graduates to meet the needs of medically underserved, focusing on rural health and telemedicine. That program here in Davis, Latino health in Irvine, diverse and disadvantaged communities in Los Angeles, and promotion of health equity in San Diego. The urban underserved in San Francisco. This new PRIME program addresses the needs of California's San Joaquin Valley and has admitted its first class this past fall, in fall of 2011. Welcome, Dr. Nation. Thank you for being here.
Hi, thank you so much. I need to shorten that bio. Linda assured me that it would just be a sentence or two.
My apologies.
No worries.
Want me to go back and pick out a couple sentences?
Yeah, no, thank you. It's a pleasure to join you this morning. I have about 12.5 slides that I think are in your packet. When Linda and I spoke several weeks ago about providing an update, she asked me to touch on a number of things, not just the state of the state in terms of UC medical education, but sort of the overall profile of medical education within the state of California, with a particular focus on a number of the challenges that we face within the UC system within the context of public higher ed. And I'll be happy to take questions as we go or at the point. So the backdrop for the balance of my slides really begins with the context of state needs, the population that our medical education serves, both in terms of medical student education and resident education, and the fact that several years back, absent any growth within UC medical education for probably 40 years, and notwithstanding staggering growth in our population, rapid aging, increases in diversity throughout the state, no real expansion of our educational system. And at that time, I was asked to help lead a strategic planning process that was really the most comprehensive undertaken by our system in a number of years. The context being, what are the needs of California as we grow in age? What is the role of the UC system under the master plan as the public system serving the state? And where might there be opportunities for growth in medicine and several other health professions? And at that time, prior to healthcare reform, we projected that the state of California would face a shortfall of some 14,000 to 17,000 physicians. And this is based upon the aging of our practice community, the growth in the population, rapid increases in age, and the fact that we know that we face existing shortages statewide. Of particular concern are the needs of medically underserved communities and particular geographic regions without the state, and I'll single out here the Inland Empire, Riverside and San Bernardino counties, and our entire Central Valley, which face existing needs but are expected to grow at a considerable clip given projections on growth in those areas. So we know our needs are going to continue to grow. So what does medical education look like? In 2010-11, we had roughly 6,460 students enrolled in 10 schools, 8 of these allopathic schools, 5 operated by the UC system, and 2 osteopathic schools, with about half of these enrolled in UC. Here you see the enrollment for our UC system, 436, again in the academic year we've just completed at UC Davis, 483 at UC Irvine, 837 at UCLA, and I'll note here that this includes enrollment of students in 2 long-standing programs that are operated by the School of Medicine at UCLA. These are the long-standing program with UC Riverside that has roughly a 35-year history and is the foundation for our efforts toward a new medical school, and a second program with an equally long history with Charles Drew University of Medicine and Science in South Central LA. San Diego's enrollment at roughly 600, and UC San Francisco's at 791, which includes a small program operated in conjunction with UC Berkeley. In terms of the private schools within the state, we have 5. Our allopathic colleagues at Loma Linda, USC, and at Stanford, with a total of 1,895 students last year, and 2 osteopathic schools, one by Thoreau and another at Western, with a total enrollment of 1,426. And we compared the privates to the publics. Private enrollment is just north of 3,300 students, with UC enrollment at about 3,200. I've included the next 3 slides that show a profile in terms of diversity, and just bear in mind here that these are not 4-year enrollments, but they are nevertheless percentages that reflect, at least for the UC system, the diversity of our classes by comparison to private schools or osteopathic schools. And my next slide will include data for the nation as a whole. But here you see, and I know there are a lot of numbers here, that UC medical schools currently have roughly 23% of their total enrollment of students from groups who are recognized as underrepresented in medicine. And this is by national standards, which enables us to do a better job counting our students. For private California medical school, as you see, this number is at about 16%, and at our 2 osteopathic schools, just 3.3%. Here are the same numbers for the University of California, again at 23% underrepresented students. This is a profile in terms of our diversity. If we take UC together with private allopathic schools and our osteopathic schools, we come together at about 16% of our overall statewide enrollment. The nation as a whole is about 14.6%, with our state, of course, far more diverse than many others in the country. And I do apologize for this slide, but it's one I think, if you can see what is in yellow or in your binders in terms of your slides, this is a profile of our system-wide PRIME initiative. And PRIME stands for Programs in Medical Education. And this was an effort that we launched roughly 8 or 9 years ago as the first mechanism for growth in medical student enrollment in 40 years. This was at a time that budget projections are not what they are, fiscal realities were not particularly good, but not nearly as dire as they are now. But we launched this effort as really a mechanism of aligning public medical education with social needs of the state of California and the needs of the medically underserved, with a dual goal of realizing some of the benefits in diversity that were lost following the passage of Prop 209 and the Regents' action that preceded that. So what's remarkable about this slide is that if we took total enrollment of our PRIME students across all 5 campuses, for 2010-11, we had 253 total students across the system in all years, with 55% of these students being underrepresented in medicine. And This is a program that is increasingly gaining recognition nationally within the medical education community as a strategy for meeting the needs of the underserved. Each of our programs within UC has a different area of focus, and I think in the introduction these were named, but I would mention again that our program at Davis has a focus on rural health and brings strength from the strong telemedicine presence at that campus. Our program at UCSF focuses on the urban, underserved, inner cities, and the homeless. Our program at UCLA has a focus on diverse, disadvantaged, and multicultural populations. Irvine with a focus on Spanish speaking, and the San Diego program with an emphasis on health disparities and border health. So what these programs have in common are several metrics. They seek to recruit students with an interest. They include an emphasis in the teaching years on particular needs, and then they place students for third and fourth clerkships in settings that will help them prepare for future practice in GME. So it is really the prime initiative that contributes substantially to the increases in diversity that UC has achieved over these past years. In terms of growth within the medical education system, we expect our prime enrollment to total just a bit over 300 students in fall 2011, at which point all of our classes and campuses will be at steady state. There is virtually no state support that has been provided for these programs. We have had some success with philanthropy, but a persistent challenge for our schools and for our students is the absence of core support for these programs. Again, we'll level off in terms of our prime enrollment this fall. This should result at steady state in a graduation of 60 to 70 medical students from the UC system on an annual basis. Most of you have probably read about efforts around UC Riverside, again a 35-year history with UCLA, a submission to the LCME a year ago for an application for preliminary accreditation that was denied, with the reason being inadequate evidence of core state support, the single overwhelming area. A few other things that the LCME asked the campus to take on, but huge concern about recurring core support for the program. We in our office are continuing to work with the chancellor and the founding dean on efforts to resubmit in a year. The goal here will be of the Riverside campus, pending LCME action, will be to enroll a first class, size to be determined. And now remember that the current program takes 28 students per year. The goal would be to enroll a class of maybe 40 to 50, again, sort of contingent upon budget. We'll settle on those numbers in the next 6 months in fall of 2013. So this will be a reach and a challenge, a lot of concern about lost momentum. It took us a long time to reach this point. We've had a lot of support, but not a partnership that makes it viable in terms of state dollars. And then finally, in terms of prime, and included in this 300 students that I mentioned for the fall, and with real kudos to our Davis School of Medicine, we have admitted the first 5 students to a new prime program that will be focused on the needs of the San Joaquin Valley. This is a 3 UC school, well, 2 UC medical school, 3rd UC campus partnership. Davis will be the LCME medical school, the degree granting program for these 5 students that have been admitted and recruited from the Valley. Clinical clerkships will be in conjunction with UCSF Fresno at the Community Regional Medical Center in the Valley, with partnership and an interest on the part of UC Merced in taking on increasing roles as budget and resources may allow. So just 5 students, but a huge leap at a time like this in recognition of need. And again, all fairly precarious given the absence of any core support for these programs. So in terms of GME, I have just one slide. I know we could devote an entire presentation and that would probably be worth the time in terms of the profile and the trends and the funds at risk in graduate medical education. I've included, in the interest of time, just one slide, which is a profile for UC. This shows 1,614 trainees in the 10-11 year in primary care, and for purposes of this graphic, This includes family medicine, it includes pediatrics, it includes internal medicine, and it includes OBGYN. 919 in hospital-based specialties for a total of 4,419. If we were to do an actual head count of trainees within the system, the UC number comes closer to about 5,000, and this additional difference includes trainees who are doing an additional year related to research or an additional area of clinical emphasis that does not lead to added qualifications but enhances the skill set. Challenges. Challenges are many, and I think are no surprise to either the board or the audience. Really unprecedented challenges in terms of higher ed and the crisis we face for undergraduates, graduates, and for the health professions. A $650 million budget cut in 11-12 alone follows multiple years of cuts and erosion in core support, with a disproportionate impact, I will say, on the health professions, which several years ago took a 50% cut in health professions. So I'm going to show a slide in a minute or two on fees and debt load, which represents a rapid change that is not moving in the direction that any of us would like to see in light of what workforce. At the federal level, MedPAC has recommended immense reductions in support for graduate medical education. These are direct costs for things like salaries and benefits, but also for indirect costs. If the Deficit Commission's recommendations were to be followed for UC alone, this would be a $900 million, close to $1 billion hit over a decade. That paired together with reductions in state support represent an immense challenge in terms of the educational system. And then I'm going to move now to a couple of slides that show you fees and rising debt loads, but the ramifications those have in terms of diversity, recruitment of students from disadvantaged backgrounds, and the placement of these students in underserved needs, I think are topics that we all need to be concerned about. So the average four-year cost of attendance in 2006-2010, so this is the period that has just ended, is roughly $200,000 for UC. And I don't know if we have graduates of UC medical schools on the board, but I'll volunteer myself and say that I graduated, as was previously mentioned, in 1989 from UCSF, when my fees totaled about $9,000. Two-thirds of my class and I graduated without debt. This is about an 1,100% increase in 2 decades. So we have a huge challenge in that we have a public who still thinks of reasonable access for public higher education that is no longer the reality for our students or their families. We don't have grants that come to medical students as we do for PhD students. So what medical students do to finance their education is they take out loans, right? And this rate of rise is going to probably jump these numbers for UC system from the 200,000 average for the 4 years that we have just concluded to 250,000 or higher for the class that is just recently admitted. Here you see the changes in the last 5 years alone, 50% change, but again, I think that pales by comparison to the 1,000% over 2 decades, which is really represents a steep slope. This is easier to see in your packets than it is here, but it really shows the distribution, not including undergraduate debt, from our UC students right here in our state, with some students graduating with upwards of $200,000 in debt. But most graduating now with upwards of $150,000 in debt prior to entering residency training, with the salaries we're all familiar with. We know health reform is going to add to our challenges as millions of people become eligible for care, and we have an erosion within sort of the public system. And then I guess I refer to this as a dark alley, and one that we should collectively be concerned about in terms of for-profit education and its growth and ramifications across the board. So this is a slide that comes from an educational foundation. It's a focus in Congress, and this is not a slide that applies to medical education, but in my last slide I'll show one. But the ramifications here are for-profit motivations in terms of education, high cost because of the role of student fees, high borrowing in terms of federal financial aid, high default rates, and very low pass rates. So this is my last slide, and I'll be happy to take questions, but I think, again, of real concern to those of us active in the national medical education community, and here in California, given the demand of California students for medical education and our own absence of growth. We've got some 56 schools, probably more, that are non-LCME schools that have opened in the Caribbean. 35 or more, sometimes difficult to count in the last decade alone, that are for-profit institutions with large numbers of our California students enrolled. And so the ramifications in terms of these students and the likelihood of passing national boards, gaining reentry and successful licensure is a huge concern as they and their families incur a lot of debt to go with the hope of returning here to practice. Happy to take questions.
Thank you. Do I have any questions from board members? I wanted to thank you very much for your presentation. We were fortunate enough, with the help of Dr. Lowe and Dr. Drousseau yesterday, who is actually on your administrative team here at UC Davis, to have a tour and a visit at the medical center, to see the cutting edge opportunities that are out there, to realize that if we don't put our money where our mouth is, and to make sure and ensure somehow that our students have the ability to get a fine medical school education, we are selling ourselves more than short. So I want to thank you for your presentation. Be well aware, I think that we're all aware of your efforts. On behalf of the University of California, we thank you. And on behalf of this board, I want to thank you as well. Thank you. So at this time, I'd like to take the President's prerogative again and interrupt our agenda and to request a special guest and former board member to please come forward. Dr. John Chin served on this board from September 2006 through June of 2011. He participated as an active member of Panel A, the Wellness Committee, Enforcement Committee, and a chair of Special Programs Committee. Geographically, Dr. Chin has not ventured far since medical school. He received his medical degree right here at UC Davis. Professionally, however, he has come far. Today, he is an associate clinical professor at UC Davis and is board certified by the American Board of Internal Medicine with a subspecialty in cardiovascular disease and holds a certificate of added qualification in interventional cardiology. Dr. Chin has been a practicing cardiologist for more than 20 years and, among other things, has served as the director of the Cardiac Transplant Service for the Sutter Heart Institute and director of the Cardiac Telemetry Program at Mercy General Hospital. Of course, patient care is a primary mission of our board and for our individual board members. I can remember as recently as the November board meeting in Long Beach when Dr. Chin had to leave the meeting early so he could return to Sacramento to care for a patient undergoing a heart transplant. We would like to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to spend a few minutes with us today and accept a token of our appreciation. John, this is for you. This is for you, and if you'd like to open it, we'd like to see it. Watch out, your hands are insured, I hope. Very nice. Very nice. Enjoy. And for the, if you would hold on to this, that way they can't crop your picture, this. That's why actually people hold on to whatever they receive in the public ceremony so that you can't be cropped. Would you like to address? Would you like to say a few words? Would you like to? We'll put this back in the box, and if you'd like to have a seat on the hot seat, we'd love to hear from you.
Well, I won't take too much of the time of the board. It was great to come back and see everybody again, and this is really unexpected and very much appreciated. I want to, again, tell everybody what a privilege it's been to have a chance to work with all of you and continue to keep up all the good work, and really was my privilege to be part of this group. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So at this time, I'd like to move to item number 21, the consideration of the request for recognition of AUA, the American University of Antigua, and ask Mr. Wharton and Dr. Nuevo to please come forward and present on agenda item number 21. Mr. Wharton, I'll turn this agenda item over to you, please.
Okay, please turn to page 97 of your packet. Please turn to page 97 of your packet. The American University of Antigua College of Medicine applied to the medical board for recognition of its medical school program. I'm going to shorten the name down to AUA-COM. So the evaluation of this school is for requirements of Business Professional Codes 2089, 2089.5, and for compliance of Section 1314.1A2. AUA-COM was determined to meet their criteria for review by the board pursuant to 1314.1A2 by the which is a school that's chartered by the jurisdiction which is domiciled. The primary purpose of the medical school program is to educate non-citizens to practice medicine in other countries. Your materials in your staff report include a recommendation to recognize AUA.com and deem it substantial to the compliance with the requirements of Business and Professional Codes 2089, 29.5, California Codes of Regulations, Title 16, Division 13, Section 1314.1, and to extend that recognition only to those students who matriculate at AUA.com on or after January 1st, 2007. As part of the evaluation, AUA.com presented a lot of materials to the board for review by staff and Dr. Nuevo. And also it included a site visit to the school and two of their teaching hospitals. The site visit team consisted of our executive director, Linda Whitney, our board member, Dr. DeRusso, our legal staff counsel, Ms. Scurry, and Dr. Nuevo, our licensing medical consultant. I'd like to take this time to introduce to you Dr. Nuevo. Dr. Nuevo graduated from the University of Vermont College of Medicine in 1980, completed his residency in family medicine at Madigan Army Medical Center in 1983, and is board certified. He served in the Army Medical Corps for 11 years. Dr. Nuevo has been faculty at the Uniformed Services University of Health and Sciences, the University of Washington, and UC Davis. He has been with UC Davis for 20 years. Dr. Nuevo has been a residency director and director of Network Affiliated Family Practice Program. Dr. Nuevo is currently professor and associate dean of graduate medical education and student affairs at UC Davis. In addition, Dr. Nuevo has been a consultant to the medical board since 1993, and I now ask Dr. Nuevo to take over the presentation.
All right, thank you, Kurt. Well, this slideshow is intended to be a supplement to the written report with the goal to give the board members an opportunity to see what it's like to do a site visit and some of the things that we learned on the site visit and the importance of the site visit. And this isn't working. All right, I'll do it this way. Yeah, let's shift. Okay, next slide. Did want to thank the board for the team that came for the site visit. You gave me a superb team. I couldn't ask for better company, better friends, better colleagues for the site visit, so thank you so much. Many of these slides are Linda's slides. This one isn't a picture that Linda took, but most of them are from Linda. Next slide. I went on this venture as a doubting Thomas and returned with a different point of view. Actually, those aren't my words. Those are the words of Dr. Seymour Schwartz, who's on the left here as the provost of the school, in his 2011 address to the meeting of the basic sciences and clinical sciences faculty. I think that if you have perceptions about offshore schools, At least under these circumstances, for the site visit we have, I believe your perceptions can be changed by what we've learned. Next slide. The strategy for the site visit was to first go to New York City and take a look at two of the training sites. This one being Richmond University Medical Center on Staten Island. The training site had a substantial number of the third-year core clerkships there. Next slide. We met with faculty from many of the different departments and looked over things such as goals and objectives, how faculty monitor student performance. Next slide. I think this was the surgical faculty. How they ensure students meet the educational objectives. Next slide. Psychiatry faculty. How the faculty communicate with the School of Medicine, how they complete reports. Next slide. OBGYN faculty. How they, their perceptions of how well the students are prepared in their clerkships. Next slide. And at Richmond University Medical Center, we met with 27 of the students. And again, we met in sequence. These were half an hour to 45-minute meetings with students on the different clerkships. I'll talk more about the approach that we took with the students. One thing I do want to highlight for the board is the impressive diversity of the student body. Frankly, the impressive character. We spent a lot of time, well over 100 students, either in groups or one-on-one, and we learned a lot about these individuals, and I was impressed, to be honest. Next slide. We then went to Wyckoff Heights Medical Center in Brooklyn, and it was the same basic approach. We met with faculty from the different departments. Next slide. These are pediatricians. I could tell you stories for hours about the individuals we met. You would love to have met this pediatrician on the right. What a delightful person, and the stories that she told. The one overall theme of all the faculty that we met was how impressed we were with their commitment to education, their commitment to training these students, their commitment to doing a good job. There were areas of improvement, but I was very impressed with them. Next slide. Faculty from surgery. Next slide. These are OBGYN faculty. One of the, just a quick thing, the physician in the middle, I think he serves as the clinical director for OBGYN. I'm just asking, okay, well, when do students have to show up? 6:30 sharp, and he meant it. And any student, God help them if they did not show up at 6:30 sharp. They set rigorous agenda, and we were impressed with that. Next slide. Family practice faculty. Again, the faculty in the middle gave a superb description of his goals, expectations, and what the clerkship was like. And again, we were impressed that it met the requirements of any student on a clerkship in family medicine. Next slide. Students also had the opportunity at Wyckoff Heights Medical Center to give us some information about how they look at community resources, research that they do, and again, these were all good things to see as part of a students on a clerkship. Next slide. We met with over 50 center, and the themes that we talked about were how they came to be at the school, how performance feedback is given, student logs. Next slide. How they evaluated rotation and their awareness of differences between training at that site for that particular clerkships and other sites that the school uses. Next slide. We also toured the facilities, looked at binders, evaluation forms, written exams, all those sorts of things that the board would want us to take a look at. Next slide. We then flew to the island of Antigua. I learned to pronounce it Antigua. Thought that you at least want to see. This was, frankly, next slide, I'll talk about this. This is the place that we stayed at. That's the Yugo tree from Hurricane Yugo that we all got a chance to look at, sort of horizontal and then goes up. If anybody thinks that going to a site visit, Caribbean, tough job, must have been a tough thing to do. Frankly, we talked to the members of the team. This was exhausting. This was very challenging. We had long hours. There was a lot of information to obtain. We knew what we were trying to do is to get an understanding of the school and the implications of that. Next slide. This is the school. You know, when you talk about facilities, well, first of all, let's take a look at the big picture from the outside. Next slide. Then the same process that we developed, and again, this will, I'll go through it as quickly as I can, but at least comprehensively as well, was we started with the leadership, and Dr. Nagra here pictured on the left, Shelton on the right there. We started looking at some of the features of the facility. This is the start of our tour, which began with the simulation suites. Next slide. Give you a sense of at least a brief visual of the resources that the school has invested in their simulation suites for the introduction to clinical medicine, getting their students prepared for their third-year clerkships. Next slide. Many different types of training stations for simulation suites. This one, intubation. Next slide. This was an interesting one. This is actually, you know, it's very tough to train students how to look at the retina, and this was a model in which those different slides on there could be put in back of the mannequin, and you can actually test the student on their ability to determine different types of fundoscopic findings. Next slide. This was Vernon Solomon is on the far left there, teacher for their ACLS, the Advanced Cardiac Life Support, BLS courses, and other EMT type of training, again with a station that allows students to understand complex challenges during codes, physiology changes in patients and so forth under different conditions. Next slide. Dr. Madeline Frazier on the right there is showing another station on the evaluation of an infant. Next slide. Again, Dr. Frazier, this is a mannequin, mannequin is probably not the right term, a simulation model called Bertha. That's for delivering babies, and they're showing how to examine, it is Bertha, how to examine the size of the uterus. Next slide. This is Harry, and Harry is the students there on the right. Dr. Frazier's there towards the middle, and that's to learn how to auscultate the heart and findings and so forth. We tested them out ourselves, again, in a very good way. Next slide. This was an ear training device to help students understand the different findings for assessing the tympanic membrane. Next slide. Obviously, it's not just all simulation training. There are other issues about a facility that have to be assessed. This is Mahid Pathan, Dean of Academic Support and Library Services. We did a tour of the library, all the facilities, all the things that one would want in a medical school library. Next slide. The library itself and study cubicles for students. Next slide. A large classroom. We went down, listened briefly to a lecture on diabetic ketoacidosis, superb lecture. Next slide. Small classroom lecture going on immunology. My immunology training, if you paid attention, was 30 years ago. They were way beyond my abilities to understand the content. But anyways, we got a chance to watch a lecture on that. Next slide. Pathology lab. I think this was a parasitology lecture. Next slide. We went to the cadaver lab, just a small view of the cadaver lab and the resources necessary. I'm staying behind Shelton there looking at, there was a Mac screen that was giving a 3D version of how to do dissection. Superb resource for students learning anatomy. Next slide. There's another element of the school that I need to recognize their willingness to dedicate 5 FTE. That's a superb dedication in the Office of Educational Enhancement. This is just one of the things that was up on their board in their office. How do you eat a hippopotamus one bite at a time? One of the challenges, of course, for students is the overwhelming load of information, and you need educational support people to help direct students how to study efficiently, how to use their time efficiently, how to be effective learners. Next slide. Linda did a great job in framing this slide. These are 3 of the 5 individuals, and they are superb people. I wish I had them in my program. Who needs study groups? You do, on the back of there. That is their mission and some of the things that they do, and we were impressed. Next slide. The process of the site visit was also to meet with the deans and the faculty of the school to get a sense of the big picture, and then from the faculty who best represent the basic sciences. Next slide. And some of the resources. On the far left there is Dr. Marcus Marin with an extraordinary resource called the Blackboard Learning Management System that would be the envy of any school of medicine. Next slide. Again, some of the resources, Vernon Solomon on the far left there, Madeline Frazier more towards the right, individuals involved in Introduction to Clinical Medicine course. We talked about other things such as how they train students to be clinically prepared, and I'll go a little bit more of that in just in a few minutes, how they handle struggling students. And then next slide, we met with a lot of students from the school. The strategy that we used was to meet with groups of students in the different semesters. There are 4 semesters before the, obviously 4 semesters before the 5th semester. Sorry, it didn't sound very professorial. But anyways, in preparation for the clinical clerkships, about 15 students per group. And we talked about the same kind of themes I mentioned before, goals and objectives, how they're assessed, academic support services, how they came to the school. Next slide. You can just keep going through the slides of the students here to give you a sense of who we were meeting with, what we were talking about, and so forth. Next slide, one more. Stop right there. Oh, go back to that one. Sometimes you learn things from students that are just terrific. And the student in the middle, I don't remember her name anymore, I just asked her, well, how does the school prepare you for USMLE Step 1? And her answer should have been recorded and presented to the board because it was very thoughtful, very insightful, and told of a student who was well engaged in the educational process, was not just there, and was understanding the meaning of how to, that one doesn't just study for a test, study in medical school to prepare for Step 1, that one is getting ready for lifelong learning, but on the other hand, you want to do well on Step 1. So I do want to recognize that student for the understanding that you'd like to see in the student body. Next slide. Next one. Again, next one. We saw a lot of students. That's the only team here. Let's see, Shelton's there. Dr. Hani Morkos is on the left. Me and Anita are in the back there. We're heading from the school on our trip to take a look at some of the glimpses of the community. Next slide. We went to Mount St. John's Medical Center, newly built 185-bed facility. Next slide. This is looking down. It's built on a hill looking down on the city. Next slide. There were plenty of students there. Linda was kind enough to snap a picture of them. Next slide. The students there, they're not doing third-year clerkships. It's just part of their introduction to clinical medicine. Next slide. We met with a variety of faculty. We toured the wards, the radiographic facilities, got a chance to speak to a few physicians. Next slide. And then there were other elements. I could give probably 30 different slides on community engagement. You'd love to see that as part of a school and what they do for the community. This just happened to be a health fair with the Prime Minister in the center, Dr. Nagra towards the right there, some faculty and students there. And I spent a great deal of time talking to students about how they get engaged in schools, in health fairs, and in clinics in the community, and you'd be impressed by all the different stories and the excitement of the students. Next slide. Back to the school. Next slide. While this is just one of those standard pictures of us, I always want to acknowledge in the background there are staff, next slide, and their staff were superb. This was a very well, first of all, I forgot to acknowledge Kurt's work, Rhonda Baldo's work in preparation from our side, and the organization that was necessary to make this site visit work. Their staff also should be acknowledged for their superb organization. It was impressive. We couldn't have been through this without the good organizational structure, so thank you to their staff as well. Next slide. One of the final things that we did was a cultural event. This is me, Anita, and Jim Simon sitting waiting for the cultural event. I wish you could all have seen the cultural event that was put on. The recognition of the importance of cultural knowledge and cultural competence. Next slide. Done in a forum, we watched dances from all different parts of the world. Next slide.
Put on by the students.
Put on by students, I'm sorry. Thank you for that qualification. Next slide. Some dances from all different parts of the world, just to give you a sense of the group and the importance of culture. And that was a big deal, and the school should be acknowledged for that. Next slide. Oh, that was it. We did spend the end meeting back with the leadership, talking about our findings. And what was interesting, and again, a testament to the school's capacity, is that towards the end I was reading a number of documents, and one being the 2010 report of the Basic Sciences and Clinical Sciences Faculty Retreat. And they had their own findings that they were very willing to have us look at all sorts of documents, some of which, frankly, if I was having a site visit, I'd hide because I wouldn't want to have to disclose the information. But their findings of their 2010 joint faculty meeting were virtually identical to our findings and areas of concern. So we talked about those, wrote the preliminary report asking for a review. They responded. Their response, I believe, was absolutely appropriate and led to the recommendation from myself and the other team members to recommend recognition of the school. That concludes my report, except for one final note of thanks to the team again. I couldn't have done this without you.
Thank you, Mr. Wharton and Dr. Novo. I'd like to call upon Dr. Dussault now, who represented the board at this site visit, to make a few remarks, and then he'll call on the president of the American University of Antigua to come forward and make some remarks as well. So.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me also make a few comments about the visit. It was hard work. And I, too, truly enjoyed the team effort that went into it, and I appreciate the board having me as their representative. I learned a lot, and I was truly inspired and really appreciate what we found. And as you can see from Dr. Novo's presentation and photos, the site visit was quite successful. I was very pleased on how we as a team conducted the site visit. It was 5 o'clock on to 7 o'clock, sometimes 10 o'clock, and it was very exhausting. But I think the results was well worth it. And at the same time, I want to echo what has already been said, and I want to thank the officials at the university for their hospitality during our visit, and quite frankly, the excellent job they are doing in preparing these students to become the very best physicians with the skills and knowledge to practice medicine globally, and more specifically in the United States. As Jim pointed out, and I'm sure the team will agree with me, I was more than impressed with the diversity of the student body and how motivated these students are in mastering the work from the time they're admitted to the school until their residencies, and the compassion that was shown by these students in serving underserved populations. It was truly, truly impressive. And lastly, I want to congratulate Mr. Neil Simon and his colleagues who are here today for his and their leadership and their vision for overseeing such a fine school. The integrated organizational structure of that university I found to be a learning environment that has the best opportunities for these students to be successful. So at this time, I would like to call upon Mr. Neil Simon, the president of the American University of Antigua, to come forward to make some comments. And while he's coming forward, I would like to make a motion to recognize the American University of Antigua College of Medicine and deem it to be in substantial compliance with the requirements of the Business and Professional Code, sections 2089 and 2089.5, and the California Code of Regulations, Title 16, Division 13, Section 1314.1, to extend that recognition to those who matriculated at the American University of Antigua College of Medicine on or about January 1st, 2007.
On or after?
On or after January 2007.
Do you have a second to that motion? Thank you. Do you have any questions from any of the board members? On the motion? On the motion, okay. Do you have any public comment on the motion specifically? Thank you. All those in favor of the motion? Well, I was going to ask for... I apologize. I was going to... My apologies.
That's all right.
I was going to let you speak after without any problem, but thank you very much. Please.
I don't think I can add very much to what was said in the presentation, except to say that one of the things that was stressed was the importance of students being lifelong learners. And we feel as a medical institution, it's also important for us to be lifelong learners. And in doing so, that means learning about our areas of weaknesses and improving them, and continuing to do that for the life of an institution. And I want to thank the site team for their very hard efforts, and it is true, going to the Caribbean is not always sun and sand. It's a lot of work, and it's long trips. Our students know that, the site team knows that, but we appreciate not only the areas in which they found us to be a strong institution, but almost more importantly, the areas in which they found we needed improvement. It helps us become a better institution, and as an institution that believes in lifelong learning, we want to thank the members of the site team for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Would Dr. Negret or would either of you gentlemen like to speak?
I apologize, but I didn't introduce people who are most responsible for our medical education program. Dr. Peter Bell, the Executive Dean of Clinical Sciences, Dr. Jay Nazra, Executive Dean of the Antigua campus.
Do we have any questions, Dr. Simonson?
I do some international volunteer work, and I always think we're teaching, but I always take it as an opportunity to learn. And with that in mind,
Dr. Simonson, your mic, please use it.
What do you think you could advise U.S. medical schools about having attracting the diverse student population and having them succeed? Because that was a very impressive finding.
Thank you. I think that, and there's the Macy report, which has been, whose findings have been adopted by the AAMC, which indicates that one of the issues in diversity is to recognize that there may be cultural differences that contribute to how people score on standardized tests. And I think we've shown that based on income level and other criteria, that students who may not score the best on standardized tests should be given an opportunity to obtain a medical education, and they've shown that that can happen and be successful. So I think that one of the things that I believe is true is that there's too much reliance on standardized tests, and that the importance of that criteria. And by the way, the AAMC also recognizes that. But whether or not that's really changing, I do not know.
I have a question. I was going to ask you, what is the tuition cost per student?
Tuition cost is $11,000
per year?
No, per semester.
Per semester?
So it's significantly less than the medical schools in the United States.
And how much, do you have scholarship programs?
Yes, we do.
What percentage of your student body is on scholarship? Or tuition
Can I give you
reduction,
num-
or?
That's too high math for me. I can give you numbers though. We have
Okay.
24 students from the Caribbean region on full scholarships. And then we have about another 5 to 7 students who have taken advantage of different scholarship programs that we have.
Approximately how many students are admitted per year?
Approximately 300, around 300. That's not in one, I'm sorry, that's in a calendar year.
Pardon me?
In a calendar year. Calendar year.
Oh, 300 per year. Okay. So I'm just trying to figure out how you're able to do what you're able to do when we in the States are having such a difficult time as far as finding the ability to find the money to educate our students. So could you give me just a little bit of that? Where does your support come from? How are you able to finance?
Well, we have we have people who are the owners of the school who have invested a lot of money and who believe in education and believe that in providing a quality education product results in becoming successful. And quite frankly, to some extent, we piggyback on the U.S. system because our students participate in the clinical training in U.S. teaching hospitals. And those programs, while we do, in fact, pay the facility for that, we get the advantage of how those programs have been developed. The other thing is that we're a university that is primarily interested in educating students to go into primary care. So while that doesn't change the scope of the educational program, I think it may change the emphasis and allows us to support this kind of program and provide a quality education to our students.
Thank you. Any questions?
I think Dr. Nader also wants to.
Perfect. Thank you.
I just wanted to respond to the earlier question that was with regard to how we prepare our students for community activities. It's a very strong focus right from the moment they enter the campus to be a part of the community networks that we have. We are working with almost 5 non-governmental agencies and with the government in various programs. For instance, we have HIV buddies. Our students go to HIV patients and they are, working with them for drug compliance, and there's so many areas, and that's a focus because I personally feel that besides what we have in the simulation models, the skills labs, it is the empathy that needs to be shown to the poor in the community, irrespective of class, and to be able to walk the ground and actually the slush. Only then are you prepared for the profession, and that's what we emphasized from the beginning.
Ms. Scurry, you wanted to make some remarks, please?
First, I wanted to say I've been on 4 site visits, and this was, thanks to Mr. Warden and to the school, the best organized site visit I've participated in. Second, from my observation, the type of student attending this school is different than in the prior, than we encountered on the prior site visits, in that more of these students are fresh out of college, as opposed to having going to medical school as a second career. It's quite a startling change from the prior site visits in that respect. And the third thing that I want to mention is just, even though it's not a part of the motion, just an understanding that this recognition, if granted by the board, does not extend to students who completed their basic sciences at Kasturba Medical College International Center.
Thank you.
There's an affiliation between AUA and another institution, and just making clear that the recognition applies to the students who matriculate at AUA.
I too wanted to thank the staff of the Division of Licensing for putting together an excellent packet so we could go on this site visit. The faculty, the students, the president for ensuring that we had access to all of the information that was necessary to perform the site visit. And thank you for making sure that we got to where we needed to be on time and allowing us to be a little late because we tarried in a few places. We were looking at the hospital a little bit longer than we should have, but we really appreciate that. The students for upping their date for their spring fling just so we could participate in that, but more importantly, the professionalism shown by the students in dealing with us and being straightforward, obviously not scripted, but they wanted to let us know what they were doing, and they talked about some of the pros and cons, and some of the cons were being so far away from home and how that was dealt with. And I was very impressed with the education faculty that dealt with the individual students that needed assistance. And I was overly impressed with the hippopotamus and the staff there because they really did have a sincere appreciation for the fact that the students needed guidance all the way through medical school, even the top students, to get into training each other because that made them better students and better physicians. So I want to thank you too for giving the medical board the access that we had in order to accomplish this site visit.
As just to let you know, Mr. Simon, and then in the end things do work out, but this was a long and arduous process. You and I have had that discussion more or less, and I just want you to see that in the end things happen for the right reasons, and you obviously, your team has shown and proven to those that needed to know what the story was. And it's, take a deep breath and keep smiling. It's nice to see you in that position, so I want to thank you. So I do have a public speaker's comment from Mr. Sheik, so I want to thank you very much and ask you can have your seats again. We'll have public comment and then we'll take a vote on the motion. Mr. Sheik, remember 3 minutes, please. Thank you.
Great work, guys. I just want some clarification. You suggested like graduates of the school are qualified to practice in America and globally. So I just, for sake of clarification, let's say they are just competent to practice in California, because that's what you are representing. I mean, that's like minor thing. Having said that, Dr. Novato has been chairman of some FP programs, 6 or 7 programs, right, on your network?
I've been a residency director.
Yeah. So, for sake of clarification, may I assume that any graduate who completes residency...
Sir, excuse me, this is not a question and answer time. This is opportunity for 3 minutes of speaking to the issue itself. The motion on the floor is the approval of the AUA program.
Yeah, don't worry, because the Chief of Licensing has already directed Dr. Norton not to answer my question.
Well, I'm just directing you to ask questions. This is not a give and take, okay? You have 3 minutes and then that's it.
Ma'am, you are required to answer the question, and you can consult your legal attorney who's sitting next to you.
She is actually not required to answer your question.
She is required.
This is public comment on an item that is on the agenda. You have the right to address the issue before you, but you do not have a right to demand answers to your questions.
Okay. I have a right to demand answer, but let me ask another question. Dr. Shelton and Dr. Lau, you have been through board training, new member training. Part of that training, you were given a training by Office of Attorney General on conflict of interest. And I have reason to believe you have significant conflict of interest. Medical board has accused a physician who has successfully completed residency training from University of California, Davis, signed by Dr. Novato, his peers, 4 people. And generally, I wouldn't think that a student who graduates from UC Davis is competent to practice in the state of California.
Excuse me, you need to be speaking on the item that you are up there for. And
Ma'am,
that is,
ma'am,
I'm not going to argue with you. I'm going to tell you what.
I'm not going to argue with you. If you cannot be quiet, please leave. Okay? Please let me talk to those gentlemen. All right.
There's a point of order, sir, and the order is this, that I am chair of this board.
Ma'am,
And sir, you just listen for a minute, otherwise.
Ma'am,
You're
you just
going to
listen.
finish with your time and you'll be finished, okay? You want to hear me out or not?
Ma'am, I'm talking to those people. They are not objecting. Let me finish, and I'm going to leave to my seat. Okay?
You need to
All right.
stay on the issue.
So you have a conflict of interest. As a UC Davis faculty, you want to see that your residents are competent to practice. As a member of the board, you have a duty to believe everything that you are told, that a student who freshly completes residency training from UC Davis is incompetent. So have you given a thought about that, a conflict of statement? Which side you believe? I mean, because you have to pick your side, which side you believe it's hurting physicians. Thank you.
Thank you. So, seeing no other public comment, I'll call for the question. And all those in favor of the approval of AUA, as the motion is stated by Dr. Dussault, thank you. Please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? So done. Thank you very much. Dr. Nova, if you just stay seated, please, since you're here, we're going to move on to item number 22, if that's all right with you. The annual report of the UC Davis Telemedicine Pilot Project. Pardon?
Good morning, this Kevin Shunke. Good morning again, board members. I think many of you are parents or grandparents and may be familiar with the children's book series, Where's Waldo?
Yes.
This morning's board meeting is going to be a travelogue by Jim Nuovo, who has taken you from the sunny beaches of the Caribbean and is now moving towards Central California and underserved areas of our state. In 2007, the medical board was asked by legislation to establish a pilot program to expand the practice of telemedicine in California. And the purpose of the program, this is under tab number 22, beginning on page 181 of your agenda packet. The purpose of the program is to develop methods using telemedicine to deliver health care to persons with a chronic disease. The bill required the board to report to the legislature at the end of the first year, or at the end of the pilot program, the findings and the summary of the pilot program. However, we quickly came to realize that this project could not be accomplished in simply a one-year span, and the contract was written for a 3-year program. A year ago today at the Sacramento board meeting, Dr. Nuovo and his team came and presented the findings of the first year of the program. The report was presented to you and it is posted on our website. Today, Dr. Nuovo and his team are here to present their findings of the second year of the program. In anticipation of next year, they'll be back again to bring the entire project to a close. So where's Waldo? Where's Jim? He's here and in Central California. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Well, again, very briefly, what we have been doing in this project is to apply the same activities or similar activities that we've been doing at the UC Davis Medical Center for some time now in working to help improve the outcomes of patients with type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is an epidemic. Type 2 diabetes causes many challenges for patients and their families. Type 2 diabetes is an extraordinary challenge in terms of costs for medical care and outcomes. And what has been found by our work and by others is that one method to help improve these outcomes, to empower patients to feel that they don't have to be overwhelmed by this particular disease, is to provide education and education targeted to self-management support. That is the theme of this entire project. We've been doing it in the UC Davis health system as always class-based, face-to-face type of intervention. This was trying to see how effective telemedicine is as a tool in doing the same types of things. What we have is our team members to show you the challenges that come in terms of recruitment of sites, and the challenges and the good things that occur in terms of the kinds of teaching efforts that come on with our health educators and coaching. And then there's another element of this has been to try to help educate the practice sites, the providers, the healthcare team to more effective ways of dealing with type 2 diabetes. So I think we're going to start with Glee. You're going to be the first one to talk. So we'll each, in turn, we'll all introduce ourselves, our role, and then what we've been doing in this past year.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Glee Van Loon, and I'm the project manager. So I spend a lot of my day doing support for this team to achieve all of the various goals that we've set. What I'd like to talk to you about today is the angle that I spend quite a bit of my time on, which has been site recruitment, identifying clinics across the state of California to engage in this research that we're doing. And so to date, we began the actual recruitment of sites with this project in January of 2010. And to date, we have made 70 contacts across the state that consist of everything from direct clinical site contacts to consortiums, associations, networks, and even accounting. So with that, we thought it might be interesting to provide to you here today the state map using the zip codes of those 70 contacts, where they lie geographically across the state, so you could get a sense of the diversity geographically that we were trying to contact. Unfortunately, the map that you have presented here today, although there are two colors, we have blue dots on here that were representing our participating sites, and red dots that represent sites that have been contacted and have chosen not to participate, and one yellow dot for a withdrawn site. Unfortunately, you can't quite differentiate too easily the colors, but as you can see by looking at the map, we have really focused on and expanded our focus, not just from Northern California as we originally set out to do, but we expanded into the Central Valley to, in an effort to accommodate more diversity and represent more diversity in this project. So we've really spread out quite a lot and reached a lot of different areas. I would say that although this map represents the 70 contacts, I would argue that it is somewhat unrepresentative because, for example, my contacts to an association has far greater outreach. The California Association of Rural Health Clinics, they promoted this project, my contact there promoted this project in their newsletter that went out to over 60 of their members. So with that one contact, I reached 60 clinics. Another example would be the Redwood Community Health Coalition. The director there sent at least 2 emails out to their membership of greater than 15 clinics, again, trying to promote this project. So just with those 2 single contacts, I had over 75 clinics that were actually reached. So in reality, we're seeing 70 contacts here, but I would say we have probably reached over 200 clinics across the state of California in an effort to interest them in this project. So our recruitment efforts have been successful and challenged on many fronts. The successful pieces have been that we to date, sitting here today, have 12 clinics involved with this project, and 12 clinics that have been extremely fruitful, interesting, have taught all of us quite a lot, and we've learned just a tremendous amount for the sake of this project in the work with them. They have been successful because we have leadership buy-in. We have an interest in those sites to expand their telemedicine work. And we have staff on site that has the time and ability to dedicate to this, to the work. The successes, I just will take a moment to read you a quick note from Eastern Plumas Healthcare, who just wrapped up with us. And as part of this project, there's a stipend that's provided to clinics based on their consented patients in the project. And this RN manager wrote an email to our team, and briefly I'll just give you a bit. It has been gratifying and an absolute delight to partner with you, Gisela and Mauricio, and UCD. We hope for the opportunity to join in additional research projects in the future. This has been great for our community and our organization. It has given our nursing staff the opportunity to participate in research that is invaluable in advancing the quality of rural health care, as well as fostering their personal and professional growth. We plan to use the $2,000 stipend for a firewall that is essential in providing the increased bandwidth necessary for the construction of our telemedicine program. So it's very wonderful to get this type of email and know the impact that we've had at a site that struggled quite a bit with their telemedicine program and what we were doing, but ultimately had a wonderful experience. Another site that I've been working with, which is Redwood's Rural Healthcare. I worked with this site trying to recruit them into this project since April of 2010, and I'm happy to report to you that they are having a kickoff event to join this project on August 2nd. But just to give you an idea of the challenge that was presented to some of these rural sites and how difficult it is for them to come on board with some of this. The email here indicates, after many months of wondering about the progress, and they're talking about their telemedicine connections, there is something to report. We have fiber optic cable in the medical building. They started pulling this week at the clinic and will finish within the next several weeks 2 miles away. They need to go over several creeks, under an annual rock slide, and over a freeway to get to the end point at the local Verizon office. So Redwood's Rural worked for a year and a half to get involved with this project, but they're finally with us. They're delighted to have a telemedicine program in place now, and we're happy to have them. So I very much appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and present some of these challenges, but I think we'd like to present Gisela Escalera and Mauricio Rodriguez, who are our health coaches, and they'll talk to you more about at the clinics what we're doing.
Good morning, my name is Gisela, and I'm one of the health coaches on the project.
And my name is Mauricio Rodriguez, and I'm also a health coach for the project.
And so we're the face of the project. We're the ones who work with the clinics once they're on board. We do the teaching, the health coaching, and we also go out to sites and do chart audits. And so we just wanted to give you a very brief summary of what we've done in the past year. And so one of the things we did was we completed our booklet and all of our forms in Spanish, and we provided some copies of the booklets in English and in Spanish. We've also been able to hold 33 classes in English and 1 in Spanish. And we've been able to work with multiple patients or participants via health coaching.
We've also had the opportunity to do some chart audits. And basically what this is that we would physically go to the clinics and of course do the chart audits. And what's interesting about this one, I don't know if I can get the second slide, Chloe. This is where the clinic was, and that's our drive through the mountains, and it's a very remote area. Cell phone reception was not there, so GPS is out of the question. Dirt roads to get to the clinic. And if I can share an experience with you that was very interesting for Isel and myself that we haven't experienced in Sacramento was that to get lunch was a challenge. with the curriculum, if you take a look, we talk about a lot of, we speak about nutrition a lot. And the health coaches were surprised that the only grocery store there was closed due to renovations. So then people directed us to restaurants. Well, within the restaurants, when we got there, people were saying that the restaurants are closed until after. And the drive itself was challenging in the daytime, so Lisa and I started thinking, well, why would it be open like in the evening, you know? Well, later for them, and it was after Memorial Day. That's when the restaurants were open. And we're talking about, we're there on May 5th, and you know, after Memorial Day is when they would be open. So they directed us to a gas station, and that was the main outlet for the community to get food. So that just gave us a sense of, you know, where the community members are buying their foods or their groceries and what's available to them.
And one of the other things that we've learned in working with these clinics during the past year is that to be successful, we have to work very closely with the clinic staff. Specifically, the site coordinators there are crucial because they're the ones who drive the project at their clinics.
Let me share an example of this. We basically had a site champion that was on medical leave for 2 weeks. She ended up taking an additional week, so she was out for 3 weeks. But when she came back, she was coming back to a new clinic position. So our project was on hold. It was actually 77 days that passed between classes, which was the first and the second. So it seemed like the momentum was lost. So it's very much site champion driven.
And so we've learned a lot in the past year. We've had some challenges, but we've had a lot of success also. And so we just want to share, to conclude, some of the feedback that we get from participants who participated in the study. And feedback from the classes is really positive. People learn a lot. They take away a lot from the class. We recently had a woman attend one of our classes who said she's had diabetes for over 10 years and have never been offered self-management education. So she thought a program like this is really great.
Another feedback that we received from a participant is that they don't have a diabetes care team and they have limited resources, so they really thought that this project was a good venue. No one has ever taken the time to go over portion sizes and reading labels, as what she shared with us. So at first it felt kind of awkward to be on screen and learn through telemedicine, but once we got the classes going, they were really comfortable with it and they were very learning a lot. They were very appreciative of the efforts.
And Mauricio and I are always touched by people's stories, you know, the things that they share with us during the class, and we learned that there's a real desire to learn, to be healthy, and to manage diabetes. And so what we really want to be successful because we want services like this to be available to more people in the future.
And then if you could maybe share the slides of the communities that we try to reach, or we've been reaching at. That's the one where we drove to, the Western Sierra Medical Clinic. And the next 2 slides is where we will be for chart audits and we're currently working with. Thank you.
Let's see, finally, we're going to have Tom Ballsbaugh talk about the CME part of this.
Hello, I'm Tom Ballsbaugh. I'm one of the faculty in the Department of Family and Community Medicine. I have a strong interest in teaching diabetes care and the chronic care model, and that's my role in the project with the participating practices. We've been successful at providing CME opportunities about diabetes care for rural and underserved practices. At the beginning of the project, we surveyed the practices to see what type of learning they were interested in about diabetes. And we asked them to give us, submit some topics, and then we created our survey to see which ones we should start with and which were most important. And the topics that we chose were reducing cardiovascular risk in diabetes, diabetes self-management, initiating and managing insulin in type 2 diabetes, nutrition in diabetes, managing diabetic neuropathy, oral medications for diabetes, and finally, new insulin delivery systems. To date, we've completed 4 of these talks via telemedicine connection, and we have the other 3 talks scheduled over the next 3 months. 9 sites participated or were registered and participated in our talks, with around 35 staff members registering their attendance. Participants take a pre-test and a post-test at the end as part of the project, and also for CME credit. The lessons that we've learned so far, I think that our greatest challenge has really been physician participation. The physicians are extremely busy in the practices. For the most part, for most of the talks, many of the physicians will arrive late because they're finishing with patients. and have to leave early because they'll need to prepare for their afternoons or in some cases their mornings. The number of participants, generally speaking, that we've registered ahead of time is less than the number that actually attend. We tried a variety of methods for making it more convenient in terms of early morning talks, lunchtime talks, and 5 p.m. talks. And one of the more interesting and I think hopeful lessons that we've learned is that the staff are very engaged in these talks. Oftentimes there's more office staff attending the talks than there are physicians. And we try to take advantage of this and have modified the talks to really include more on the team approach to each of these problems. So I think so far, greatest lesson learned is that teamwork is going to help the practices. One of the most interesting anecdotes I can share with you from one of the talks was when I gave the cardiovascular risk talk. One of the participants was a medical assistant, and he had recently returned from an Army deployment in Guam. And he was describing on each day how he would review the charts ahead of time and prepare it for the nurses and the physicians so that they wouldn't miss anything, so that they would accomplish the things that they wanted to during that visit. And he said that was just expected of him as part of his job there. And he said when he returned to California and started working in this rural clinic, he had asked about doing this in the current practice, and they said, well, that sounds like a good idea, but really didn't have a lot of specific direction for that. And so he's really offered to include it in his responsibilities here. And he said he wanted some guidance about where he could be more proactive and start helping the care team be ready to take care of the patients who came in with diabetes. And so we in the discussion as part of this talk, we had some ideas about how he could help shift this paradigm in that office to being more proactive. And it was very much a give and take via the telemedicine connection. So my takeaway from this at the end was, if we can do it in Guam, we can do it in California.
I just wanted to share my name is Teresa Farley, and I am the administration officer at the Center for Healthcare Policy and Research, where this project is administered. And my role in the project is to really support the team from a human resources standpoint, also from a standpoint of fiscal accountability, as well as aligning ourselves with policy and procedure as it relates to the IRB and university policy. So one of the things that I want to share also is just that I won't belabor the point, but many of you have the annual report, and you'll see that the majority of the participants that have engaged with the entire team have really had a positive experience with telemedicine and with the self-managed care prevention model. So we really appreciate the opportunity to do this work with you.
So that concludes our presentation. Any questions from the board?
Dr. Carrion?
First of all, congratulations for the team effort. And being an obstetrician, let me give you a recommendation. Today, there is emphasis in the preconceptional testing with hemoglobin A1C to see that it's normal or abnormal, because we found that in the hemoglobin A1C that you will know is what should be less than 7, and if it's more than 7, the congenital anomalies increase. There is a tendency today in the clinics to do that, and it's working. And this is something that I don't think in the area that you are working, the education for these people should emphasize, because any congenital anomalies, we really are having serious problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have any other questions, Dr. Levine?
Just a question. In these 3 communities with stunningly small populations, what is the prevalence and incidence of diabetes? We've got essentially 2,500 people between the 3 communities, residents.
Yeah, I don't think we know the prevalence within the community. I doubt anybody else does
Well, I think we probably couldn't answer that question right off the top of our head, but one of the things that I know that Ms. Van Loon does when she recruits is actually capture the specific number of patients in a respective clinic that have been diagnosed with diabetes, and so that's probably information that we can get back to you, most definitely, as far as letting you know what information we've received from the clinic based on their patient population. I think the other thing that I wanted to also share is that Dr. Balswood just reminded me that the other thing is many of our participants are part of a patient base that drives significant amount of time, sometimes as little as 7 miles, but in many cases as long as 60 miles to a clinic. So while that specific little pocket has maybe a small population, there might be a large community surrounding that's the nearest clinic in which they can reach.
Do you have, or are you working with a diabetes map of California, or is this something you could generate in terms of graphically demonstrating the density of the disease burden in different communities across the state? I've never seen one.
Yeah, definitely something we can try to accomplish. It's a great point.
Just a quick comment. I'm just noting the balance in your About Me surveys. It was 79% Caucasian and 6% Latin American Hispanic. Seemed a little bit lower than I would expected. Is that just because of the survey response, or just where you've been able to penetrate, or?
One of the things that we made great attempts to do, and looking back at that map, we really tried to reach clinics where the population of Spanish-speaking individuals was greater, and we've had a lot of trouble getting sites to sign on to the project that include this population. We do have a new site that's started with us that is down in the Central Valley, and we're hoping to have more Spanish-speaking classes out of that site. But it's been challenged from a number of different perspectives, and we do recognize that we will, and we also hope to also have better results from the balance. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Lowe.
I have a couple of questions and some comments. Can you review with us the funding for this project and who's paying for it?
Came from AB 329.
Well, my understanding of the funding and the source is that it's certainly coming from, we're being supported from the medical board, but it's coming from fees that are being paid from, as I understand, providers. So it's a result of fees.
So how much is the project costing us?
We have a contract of $400,000 with Dr. Nuovo and his team and the University of California, Davis to do this pilot study over a 3-year period.
So as a clinician, I'm obviously very invested in good diabetes management, and so I'm wondering what the metrics are. I mean, what is it that we're trying to do with this, and what are we using to measure the outcomes? I mean, are we looking at improvement in hemoglobin A1C for the masses? I mean, other than testimony from people in the program and the patients, I mean, what metrics are we using to look at success? What are we actually achieving?
Yeah, the overall goal of AB 329 was to look at, is telemedicine an effective tool for reaching patients who don't have these types of educational resources? That is indeed one metric in terms of the qualitative understanding of what it takes to do that. Here's a assembly bill that was passed with funding that was, appropriated in that sense, yet the stories that we can give, if there's a creek in the way and that it becomes a problem, it can take a long time to even get telemedicine to that site. It's not as simple as just pushing a button and having access to a health educator and so forth. So there are qualitative aspects of this in terms of how does a state approach a population at great risk for all the complications that occur with type 2 diabetes, and is telemedicine one of those tools that can do that? So you have to consider the qualitative aspects of this a metric to look at. The other elements of it are well studied in terms of the impact of health coaching and education classes on perceptions, on feeling of control for patients, their perception of the ability to take care of themselves, their overall sense of well-being. But also, we are capable of looking at factors such as hemoglobin A1C, blood pressure control, and so forth as part of it. So yes, there are absolute metrics that will be looked at that are objective based, but there are also qualitative metrics that must be assessed as well as to whether this truly is a generalizable project that can help the health of a population with a disease that's an epidemic.
So these times are very economically challenging times for Californians, for our country, for all of us. And we have to decide how to get the most return on our investment. And I don't think anybody questions the ability of telemedicine in terms of a tool for outreach. But unless we can show that we can improve the outcomes from all these efforts, it's cost effective, and that we're saving money in terms of healthcare because people are taking better care of themselves and have better diabetes management and fewer complications, you know, we need to have those kind of metrics that show us our investment has good return. And I'm not convinced that this project has that focus. We have to have return on investment. We have to you have to show us we save so much money because we prevent so many heart attacks, kidney transplant, kidney failure, dialysis, et cetera, Until we can do that, you know, we have to be careful where we send our money.
Oh, I agree, and that will be part of the assessment is part of our final report.
Do you think it's going to be enough for you to give us?
It's always difficult, like Dr. Lowe was mentioning, you want to see a return on investment as soon as possible. Of course, the challenge with diabetes is that the outcomes can take, adverse outcomes can take years to occur. But there are methods to do a projection based on short-term results. They aren't perfect by any means, but there are means to do so, and that's how we'll be presenting it to the board.
So obviously you can't track, you know, long-term outcomes, but we have surrogate markers like hemoglobin A1C, weight reduction, etc. These are short-term markers that we know correlate with outcomes, and they're easily done, and they should be tracked. If we're not tracking them, then we need to be tracking them.
We'll be having that information for you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I just wanted to ask the question that, given what I did hear from the coaches, two specific things that were now being re-educated within the population that you're doing, one being portion size and the other being product ingredients, that as part of this survey, will there be, or should we expect that there will be advice to the state of California on what to be including in education in public schools, as far as the ability that if this correlates to something that is missing in the knowledge of the population you're surveying currently, and if those two specific items of knowledge are what is lacking in the education of that population, the population you're treating is only a microscopic portion of the state at large. So will you also be coming forward with recommendations on educational opportunities for the population at large?
Absolutely. I think that's a big part. I think that this is indeed a public health assessment, and there should be those types of statements made by our research team in our final analysis of our data.
Okay. Dr. Samenson?
Well, talk about barriers. If there's not even a grocery store, I mean, even if they know what to buy, if all they can find is a Twinkie, I mean, seriously, in addition to getting healthcare people, it sounds like we need grocery stores. I mean, I'm stunned.
Yeah, the concept is called a food desert, if you've not heard that term. And there are many areas that have high incidence within cities and in rural areas in which you can't get access to or low-cost fresh fruits and vegetables, whole grains, those sorts of things. And it's easy to get access to the incorrect things to be consumed.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. I'm going to ask for a 5 to 7 minute recess. Then we're going to continue with item number 23 on our agenda. So it's now 16 past 11. I would ask that everyone be back in their seats at 11:25. And Ms. Linningfield, don't go too far because you're going to be up soon. Thank you. I'd like to get started, so if I could find a quorum up here at the table, I sure would appreciate it. Okay, we're going to move on the agenda to item number 23. Item 23 has been deferred. It's a consideration of the petition to repeal section 1349. The author has asked for us to take that off, and that will be dealt with at the next meeting. So, thank you. So, moving to item number 25, I would ask Ms. Angela Minifield to please come forward. Provide a report on health care reform in California.
Good morning, members of the medical board. I am pleased to be here. I am Angela Minifield, the Deputy Director for the Office of Statewide Health Planning and Development, Healthcare Workforce Development Division. Before getting started, I'll give you just a tad bit of information about how this presentation is going to proceed. First, I'm going to just give you a bit about the Office of Statewide Health Planning and Development, tell you who we are. Then I'm going to talk specifically about the partnership that we've built with the California Workforce Investment Board to really focus our healthcare reform efforts related to the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. And then lastly, I'm going to talk about the planning grant that California has received to implement the various provisions of the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act as it relates to developing the health workforce. A little bit ahead, so excuse me for a moment.
Technology is just great.
Yes, it is. Okay, so the Office of Statewide Health Planning and Development is one of 13 departments within the California Health and Human Services Agency. We really focus on our vision, which is equitable health care accessibility for California. And this role really allows us to analyze California's healthcare infrastructure to promote a diverse and competent healthcare workforce. We provide information about healthcare outcomes. We also are involved in the assuring that California hospitals and other health facilities are safe, and that we review hospital plans and approve building permits for hospitals. We ensure loans to encourage the development of healthcare facilities in areas of unmet need, and we also facilitate the development of sustained capacity for communities to address local healthcare issues. We've been in this business since the late 1970s. Some of OSHPA's health workforce development activities are really focused on increasing health workforce supply and supporting existing healthcare workers, Also enhancing healthcare workforce education and training through programs like the Song Brown Healthcare Workforce Training Program, and supporting innovations in healthcare delivery through our Health Workforce Pilot Program, which is a program that allows categories of healthcare personnel to test innovations in healthcare delivery. Some of the other workforce development activities of the office include strengthening primary care and other workforce improvements, improving access to healthcare services. We administer the Shortage Designation Program. That's the program that is responsible for identifying health professional shortage areas throughout our state, as well as medically underserved areas and medically underserved populations. We have a direct relationship with the Office of Shortage Designation at HRSA. So just to give you an overview of some of California's current health workforce challenges. We have a shortage of health professionals. We also have the issue that health professionals are maldistributed. We have a lack of racial and ethnic diversity in health profession categories. We also have insufficient numbers of professionals who are bilingual. There are the education capacity constraints that we face. We have varying scope of practice laws. We also have reimbursement policies that don't necessarily enhance our ability to attract providers to underserved areas. The economy is something that I know you all are aware of, and then we have an increased demand for healthcare services, specifically as it relates to healthcare reform, but also pre-healthcare reform. I'm going to talk to you for a few moments about the various elements of Title V of the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. Specifically, the Act has in Title V several workforce provisions. The first is about supporting innovations in health workforce preparation. And in that particular section of the Act, they created the National Healthcare Workforce Commission, which California has actually two representatives, Dr. Kathleen Flores and also Steve Zatkin, Mr. Steve Zatkin, who is a former executive for Kaiser Permanente. The Act is also focused on increasing the supply of the healthcare workforce, including funding provisions for scholarship, loan repayment, internships, fellowships, etc. It's focused on enhancing health workforce education and training opportunities and has provided a variety of funding grants that are targeting primary care residency programs, also physician assistant programs, nurse managed healthcare clinics. It's focused also on supporting the existing healthcare workforce and strengthening primary care and other workforce improvements through pilot projects. It also improves access to healthcare services, and you all are probably aware that community health centers and clinics have received quite a large amount of funding pursuant to the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act to enhance their capacity. At the state level, the office has partnered with the California Workforce Investment Board to develop a comprehensive strategy for workforce development. We did receive a planning grant to begin work that is, again, focused around the Title V provisions of the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. This is sort of a history of the council. Specifically, the Health Workforce Development Council was established as a special committee of the California Workforce Investment Board, and the mission is really to expand California's health workforce, to provide access to quality health care for all Californians, to also understand the current and future workforce needs of California's health delivery system, and develop a comprehensive strategy to meet those needs. It also has provided a broad forum for broad stakeholder engagement, and by that we mean we have sought the expertise of representatives of the healthcare industry, representatives of health professions education and training programs, philanthropic representatives, as well as advocates and economic development representatives. And we do have members of the legislature that also serve on the Health Workforce Development Council. We also have as a partner organized labor. The council is currently focused on the planning grant activities that I mentioned earlier. And again, the planning grant is really designed to provide a mechanism for collaboration and cooperation that will be needed between multiple sectors of the healthcare industry. It is designed to really allow us to work in partnership with not only state agencies, but also private partners that will be needed to really resource our health workforce development strategy. The planning grant has several requirements, the first of which was to really analyze state labor market information to create health career pathways for students, adults, and dislocated workers. Also to identify current and high demand state or regional healthcare sectors, to look at what resources exist at the federal, state, as well as private resources that are focused around recruiting, education, and training the healthcare workforce, as well as the prospective healthcare workforce, as well as those incumbent workers, to describe both the academic and healthcare industry skill standards that are required at various levels of the health professions education continuum, and also to describe state secondary and post-secondary education and training policies, and then to really look at federal and state policies that are either helping to develop, will help us develop a coherent and comprehensive workforce strategy, or that may be hindering us from developing a workforce strategy that really increases access to care, particularly in areas of unmet need throughout our state. As part of the planning grant effort, we held 11 regional focus groups. There were nearly 400 participants at those focus groups. And those focus groups really identified 4 sort of global themes around the alignment of education and training with industry standards, the need for more collaboration and partnerships, and a targeted focus on increasing cultural competency and diversifying our healthcare workforce, as well as developing career pipelines. Another effort that we pursued through this planning grant process was to develop a career pathways subcommittee that was really focused on some of the provisions that I mentioned earlier with relationship to the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, and really focused around existing and potential health career pathways that could increase access to primary care, the existing education and training capacity and its ability to accommodate these career pathways, and also the academic and healthcare industry skill standards that are required. The subcommittee also focused on issues of recruitment, retention, attrition, articulation and curricular disconnects, and identified policies that really are needed to facilitate the transfer of students from one education segment to the next. It also focused on the need for pilot or demonstration projects in eligible health personnel categories or new health personnel categories, and some of those things include like the use of community health workers and promotores. The Career Pathways Subcommittee reviewed pathways for 8 professions: primary care physicians, nurses, clinical lab scientists, medical assistants, community health workers. I won't read them all. But really, the Career Pathways Subcommittee was able to leverage work that was already been done. I should have mentioned earlier that part of the planning grant effort, because there are so many activities that are going on statewide to help address the health workforce shortages in a number of different specialties, we were really about trying to leverage work that had already been done. So the fact that the Career Pathways Subcommittee
focused on these is not necessarily how the council has prioritized healthcare categories of focus. Rather, we were looking for cross-cutting recommendations that would emerge from our analysis of these 8 professions, and we have additional professions that we will be looking at, including physician assistants, also the alcohol and other drug abuse counselors. We haven't quite finished the work on that particular pathway. And home health workers and personal care aides. Some of the recommendations that have been identified throughout our planning process have included the expansion and institutionalization of holistic file review for admissions to really more so look at an individual's community background and upbringing along with their GPA and test scores and things like that. Increasing partnerships, again, between educational institutions and the healthcare industry to ensure that people are being prepared throughout their didactic and clinical training to meet the needs of the healthcare delivery system. And also the need to really integrate cultural sensitivity and responsiveness into the training program climate. The other recommendation is that we have insufficient means to collect data and report data about California's health workforce supply, and also to project the demand for healthcare workers. So one of the recommendations is really to establish a mechanism through the OSHPD Clearinghouse program. The clearinghouse at OSHPD is something that was statutorily mandated in October 2007. And I do need to acknowledge and thank the Medical Board of California because they've been a great partner in this regard as we strive to implement and launch the Healthcare Workforce Clearinghouse Program in June of 2012. Specifically, it would allow us to develop some baseline data about California's health workforce, and specifically, in this case, physicians, and help us to identify the supply of physicians in accordance with California's geography, help us to identify the racial, ethnic, language, background, and proficiency of physicians, and then also help us to assess our education capacity, medical education capacity, and specifically, but also in other areas of health, the health industry. There's also a need to establish a centralized database of interested candidates who are interested in pursuing primary care careers, and assure that there is communication with those individuals throughout the various levels of the pipeline. In terms of policy, there is a need to develop new California Department of Education standards and model curriculum, and that is an effort that CDE is already pursuing in accordance with the California Health Workforce Alliance. There's also a need to create federal policies that support the training of incumbent healthcare workers, to create interdisciplinary core competency standards, and to create policies to support the integration of healthcare professions education in primary and secondary education. The emphasis there is really on creating awareness of health career opportunities early on, and one means of doing that would be through introducing health professions education at the primary and secondary education level, which I know some will say is a very long-term strategy, but given where we are today with the insufficient numbers of folks that are entering health professions, particularly from underrepresented and economically disadvantaged backgrounds, that might be one way to educate people about those opportunities. Also to mandate cultural competency training and certification for new and incumbent healthcare workers. Some of the recommendations that emerged specifically regarding the primary care physician workforce would be to increase primary care career awareness among students, advisors, parents, policymakers, and the general public, to increase recruitment and retention of primary care team members in California, particularly in those areas of the safety net or underserved areas of our state, to again strengthen training program access and support,
to increase numbers and the diversity of California primary care team members, and also to increase the number of California primary care residencies, particularly those residencies that are outside of non-acute care settings, and more so in community health centers, and increase the number of graduates who enter primary care. And then one that we heard constantly was the need to really develop supportive payment policies that would increase the attractiveness of primary care as a career choice. Again, the focus of the OSHPOD and California workforce investment work has really been to have broad stakeholder engagement, and we've done this through a variety of venues, through the Health Workforce Development Council meetings. The next meeting will probably be in mid-September. Through technical assistance calls, we often have technical assistance calls about federal grant opportunities, and we make ourselves available to provide letters of support to institutions that are applying for these federal grant opportunities. We also are involved in many other statewide organizations and initiatives that are focused on health workforce development activities. We have a website that includes information on all of our activities. So I invite you all to sign up on our website to get information about the grant opportunities and just to stay engaged about the state's health workforce planning activities generally. There's my contact information, and now I can take some questions.
Thank you very much. I'm sure all the board members here are well aware of your long time connection with this board, and I want to thank you again, not only from your work with OSHPD, but for your work at a moment in time with Health Professions Educational Foundation, which at the time was a Stephen Thompson loan repayment. So thank you for coming back again this year and for your information and insights. So do I have any questions from Dr. Drousseau?
No, not a question, just a comment. Thank you very much, Angela, for a very informative presentation. I think this is the third one that we've had on workforce development for this board meeting. And the point I want to make is this particular one has, I think, some recommendations, if somehow we can figure out to implement them, would have some real meaning to address this problem. And I don't know what entity will have that responsibility for implementation. You know, and I think we are going to hear other entities present on this issue as well. Even Barbara, the foundation board, will also be doing some discussion about that as well. So I'm most interested in us at least having a discussion about what entity or entities are going to begin to take a look at implementation. And that includes the previous presentation that was made by the University of California, of which I'm a member, and Dr. Lowe is as well. And we have some challenges there, as you have seen, and they're real. And I think they are going to become more and more critical, perhaps even a crisis if we're not careful going forward and to respond to this healthcare reform. So I'm interested in having a discussion about implementation.
So I would recommend that this afternoon's conversation on the strategic plan, that should come forward probably in goal number 6. That might be a good location for it. Do I have any other comments? Or yes, Dr. Levine?
Thanks so much for this. Is really informative, and I think one of the things that characterizes how difficult this work is those slides could have been up there 5 years ago and 10 years ago. One specific question is pharmacists weren't on your list. That is a growing need, and I think a growing shortage in the state. Is that part of your, is that an area of inquiry for you?
It definitely emerged as an area of inquiry throughout the focus groups as a means of addressing and increasing primary care access. For the Career Pathways Subcommittee, again, The focus was around existing bodies of work. We were leveraging existing bodies of work. So we will, at some point, look at the pharmacy workforce specifically, but we just have not gotten to that one yet. Thank you.
Any other? Thank you really very, very much. We're very appreciative of the time and the scope of the engagement of OSHPD within helping to develop future opportunities for closure, meaning being successful. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Look forward to hearing from you again. So now I'm going to suggest that it's 5 minutes to 12. My understanding is I'd like to see a show of hands of how many people need to check out, or if we could return to item number 10 and start check out. And lunch. Okay, so we're going to take, it's now just before 12. Can I recommend that those people that need to check out should check out? Lunch is available, and be back here at 12:30. Start. Thank you. Half hour. I mean, checkout should take about 2 minutes, 3 minutes? 3 minutes. 3 minutes, and then lunch you can eat for 20 minutes.